The topic today is collisions, and we're going to look at 4 different kinds. Let me set this up for you a little bit. We're going to imagine with me that this is your game screen. That's not a great drawing, but it'll work. So this is your game screen, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to take some kind of sprite, some kind of object, and set it like over here toward the right-hand side of the screen, and we're just going to make it a stationary object. It's not going to move. You can choose what actual object it is. I'll show you mine in a minute, but it's just going to sit there. Then we're going to take something else and put it over here on the left-hand side of the screen, and we're going to put it on a collision course. We're going to assign some velocity to this guy right here and make him move in that direction. And sooner or later, what he's going to do is get to the point where he would collide or run into this object over here. And we are going to look at, there are some code blocks on code.org that you can use to set up different kinds of collision relationships, and they are things like this. There's one called bounce, there's one called bounce off, there's one called collide, and there is one called displace. Now our goal of the day is to walk away with a decent understanding about what those do. If it's a relationship that you set between objects, and if you set one relationship to have a bounce, or one object to have a bounce relationship with another object, what does that mean? What happens? Some of them just kind of make sense. I bet you can guess on bounce off, but what we want to do is make sure. We don't want to guess. We want to make sure that we know what happens when you set up these different kinds of collisions. And today, it's going to be a collision with a stationary object. All right, well, that's your setup. Let's go to work over here on code.org. I'm just going to go to Create. I'm going to go to Game Lab. There are going to be 4 programs today, but they're going to be really super easy. All right, I'm going to go to the Animation tab, and I am going to use, I'll just do a search here. I'm going to use this yellow car, and then I'm also going to use the cactus. Now, you don't have to use those exact pictures. You can use whatever you feel like you want, but we're just going to have a moving object that is going to be on a collision course and run into a stationary object. All right, so over here in the code, I'm just going to get, I got to build all this stuff. I'm going to bring over some, I'm going to define some sprites. I have 2 sprites that I have to define here, and I want to get their initial locations figured out as well. I'm going to have a car, and it's going to be over 0 and down 200 because I want it to be at the left-hand side of the screen. All right, and the car sprite is going to be that yellow car. I'm going to call this object, and that one's going to be over, I'm going to go like 350. That's going to put it way over to the right and down 200. So that should put it like over here on the right-hand side of the screen. And so this will be object, because the car is going to run into an object, and that object for me is going to be the cactus. All right, so now we go to work inside. Well, one other thing I'm going to do just because I feel like it. I am going to rotate the car because I want the car to point in the direction that it's going to go. So I'll do that. All right, that's really, that's optional. All right, so inside the draw loop, now we go to work in here. I want a background color, white or whatever. That's kind of up to you. And I'm going to go ahead and throw in a draw sprites right now. And if I run this right now, you see what I've got. There's a cactus, and the car is pointing it toward the cactus. Now, the thing that the car doesn't have yet is a velocity. So I'm going to give the car a velocity. The cactus does not get a velocity. It's supposed to be a stationary object just sitting there. So I'm going to go back to sprites here, and I'll get a velocity x, and I'm going to assign this velocity x to the car. And, the speed is up to you. I'm just going to put it at 3. Let's not make it go so fast you can't see it or anything. So now if I run it, the car is heading toward the cactus. Now, nothing happens at this point. It just goes behind the cactus. All right, so this is where we start playing with these blocks, and this is where it's going to get really pretty quick and easy. All right, over here in the sprite drawer, these are in the sprite drawer. I'll do bounce first. I have found the block that says sprite, bounce, target. I'm just going to drop it right in here inside the draw loop. So I'm going to put that. I'm going to put that right in here. And I'm going to say car bounce object And that sets up a relationship between those two. If they happen to collide, this is what's going to happen. Now, what we're going to do is find out, well, what does that look like? What does that actually mean? So when I run that program, there's what it means. It's kind of like does anybody play pool? It's kind of like a pool ball. If you hit the cue ball and it goes down and hits another ball, a lot of times the cue ball kind of stops and the other ball moves because let's go science, let's go physics for a minute. The kinetic energy is transferred from one to the other, and that's kind of what's happening here. The car stops, but it bounced the cactus out of there. All right, so that's what bounce does. If a moving object hits a stationary object, that's what bounce is. So I'm going to come up here and rename this, and I'm going to just call this B-O-U-N-C-E, and I might stick a 1 on there, bounce 1, whatever. All right, so I'm going to name that bounce. Save it. All right, now this is so easy because all we're going to do is I'm just going to remix that program, and I'm going to rename it. And the next one that we're going to look at here is bounce off. So that sorry, that's what I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it bounce off. Save that. And there is not a lot of editing to do here, folks. All I'm going to do is take this block that says car.bounce object. I'm going to pull that out. I'll go back to sprites, and we're just going to set it up with a different relationship. We're going to give the car and the cactus a different relationship. All right, it's going to be bounce off. This is so easy. All right, so I'm going to say car.bounce off, and it's going to have to be object on mine. That's what I labeled it. All right, so again, the thing that we want to walk away with is understanding what does that mean? What happens? The object, the cactus, is stationary. The car is moving. What's going to happen? I think you can probably guess on this one. But anyway, here we go. Car is coming. Collision course. Boink. Not a big surprise, I don't think. The car bounced off the object. The car bounced off the canvas, or the cactus. All right. Yay. So that one's done. Let's move on. Now we have an understanding of that, right? We know what bounce off does. Let's remix this. Let's rename this. And the next one's going to be collide. And I'll save that. It's going to be called collide. I'm going to pull this out, take that off, and I'll just go back to sprites, and I'm going to find the one that says sprite.collide target. All right, drop that in. It's going to be car.collide object. And again, I think it's always kind of fun. I already know what it's going to do, but it's kind of fun, I think, for you to just mentally, what do you think is going to happen? Just make a mental prediction. Here it comes, car is coming, boom. So the way to kind of think about this is if you set up a collide relationship between these two, and remember the car was moving and the object was not, the object kind of becomes like, in this case, a cactus, kind of becomes an immovable object. When the car comes moving along, it doesn't bounce off of the cactus. It can't push the cactus off. The cactus is like an obstacle, right? It keeps the car from continuing. So this is a good game thing to have obstacles sometimes. So that's a way to do it. Collide is the block there. Car collide object, and you see what happened. All right, so collide is done. All right, so let's remix and let's rename. And our last one that we're going to do today is called displace. I'll save that. You're going to have this assignment done really quickly. All right. And so for displace, I'm going to pull out that block again, and I'm going to go back to sprites. And I want the one that says sprite displace target. Just drop it right in there. And it's going to be car displace object. All right, and again, maybe just a second for mental prediction. What do you think this is going to do? What do you think is going to happen when those two items meet? The car comes over and it runs into the cactus, and what do you think is going to happen? All right, well, let's go. Here it comes, and watch what happens. Boom. All right, it's a little bit the opposite of the collide thing. The car becomes like the stronger item in this case when it says displace, and it has the power, it has the capability to push that cactus right out of the way. And you can shove the cactus, in this case it's a cactus, you can shove the cactus sideways, and so the car keeps its velocity and just keeps going and pushes anything that is in its way out of the way, as long as it has a displace relationship with that object. So I set that up. The car can displace the cactus. All right. Well, gosh, that's it. That's what we're working on today, just trying to have an understanding of bounce, bounce off, collide, and displace. And if you feel like you're pretty solid with those things, then you're done.